Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Life, Liberty, and Levin, and I'm here with an old friend of mine, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. How
Good
are
to
you,
be
sir?
with you, Mark. I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me.
A lot of people know who you are. You retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, former member of the House of Representatives. You were born in Atlanta, Georgia, the same neighborhood as Martin Luther King.
Exact same neighborhood, the old Fourth Ward neighborhood.
And you hold a BA from the University of Tennessee, 2 master's degrees, Kansas State University, and also the U.S. Army Command and General Staff Officers College. Now, your father was in the military?
Yes, my father was a corporal during World War II.
Your older brother?
My older brother was a lance corporal in the Marine Corps in Vietnam.
And your nephew?
My nephew just got back from his 3rd deployment in the Middle East, and he is currently stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where 35 years ago I showed up as a brand new 2nd lieutenant.
And you served in Iraq?
Served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then in Iraq, and I went to Afghanistan for 2.5 years as a civilian military advisor.
And some time in Kuwait?
Yes.
Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Your family is a military family. How did that happen? Why?
Well, you know, I think that when my dad sat down and talked to me early on, I was 15, and he challenged me to be the first officer in our family. And one of the things of that generation that my dad was brought up in, they wanted to prove themselves that they were loyal, patriotic Americans. And when I think about my dad and the sacrifices that he made to go and serve in uniform for a country that did not afford him all the rights and privileges that it did to others, and I will never forget when my dad said that there's no greater honor than to wear the uniform of the United States of America. And that's why I take my oath that I took 31 July 1982 so seriously and to heart still today.
Were you a good kid before you went into the military?
Oh man, my granddad used to nickname me a mule because I was very stubborn, very hard-headed, and I write about it in my book that my parents, from the 1st grade through the 9th grade, I went to private Catholic school, and I told them, hey, look, I really just want to go to the public school down the street, and they didn't want to listen and everything, so I ran away from home.
Really?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, it was my first, well-planned operation. I studied my dad and my mom's sleep habits and everything like that. I figured out the Greyhound bus schedule. Now, like I said, I wrote about it in my book. And I knew that my mom's sister, Aunt Sally, she lived up here in the D.C. area. And I snuck over to the Greyhound bus station in Atlanta and caught a ride up here to Washington, D.C. But I left them a note. They knew everything that was going on. And they allowed me to transfer to a public high school, which, really set me on the course to be where I am today. I joined ROTC. I ended up becoming the Cadet Battalion Commander, which launched me to go into ROTC at the University of Tennessee. But there were those 4 instructors at Grady High School. It was Lieutenant Colonel Pagonis, Lieutenant Colonel Pagonis, Major Heredia, Master Sergeant Buchanan, and Sergeant First Class McMichael. All 4 of those gentlemen were either Korea or Vietnam veterans. A couple of them were both. And they saw something in me that I did not even know that was in me as well. But it was so important because that structure, that discipline that I had in my home, they made sure that I continued down that path when I was in high school.
A lot of young men who have difficulty as kids and so forth, when they get into the military, it changes them.
Oh, absolutely it does.
It's really an important experience. My father was one of them, too. You met my father.
Yes.
World War II veteran. And to make the long story short, eventually you decided to get into politics. When did you decide to get into the politics, and what drove you to do that?
Most of the folks in the military really don't care for politicians. As a matter of fact, if you are an officer and you got the assignment to be an escort for a member of Congress or whatever, it's probably because you had pissed off your commanding officer. That was not something that we saw as a, grand thing to do. But it was so interesting. I came back after the 2006 midterm elections that the Republicans had lost, and a local woman by the name of Donna Brosmer said she wanted to sit down and talk to me, and she spoke to me about running for office. And, my mindset was on, hey, look, I'm just here for a couple of weeks. I got to go back to Afghanistan. I'm down in Kandahar. I'm working with the Afghan army, Taliban all around us. But she said something that really resonated, Mark. And she said, just because you're out of uniform, just because you've retired from the military, it doesn't mean that your oath of service is ended. And that struck me very hard because the oath that we take, the oath that my father took, the oath that my older brother took, the oath that my nephew took, was to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to bear true faith and allegiance to the same. And if you truly believe in that, she was right. And so I embarked on this thing called being a United States congressman, not wanting to seek fame or fortune or a career in politics, but to continue my service to this country.
When did you realize you were a conservative? Were you always a conservative?
Well, this is the thing. And my parents were registered Democrats. I grew up in John Lewis's congressional district, which was very interesting when I presented that to him when I was sworn in with the Congressional Black Caucus. But my parents raised me with conservative principles and values. They believed in faith, they believed in family, they believed in individual responsibility, good quality education, and service to the country. And I think if we start to have conversations in America, not about Republican or Democrat, and I really think the two-party system is falling apart, but if we start to talk to people on the principles and values about what makes this country so great, what enables a kid from the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia, to be sitting here with such an incredible scholar like yourself on Fox News on a Sunday night. That's the American dream, and that's what we fight for, and that's what our founding fathers fought for. It is about an equality of opportunity instead of an equality of outcomes. And that's what makes us conservatives. We believe that this is a great land of opportunity, and we just believe, as Jefferson wrote, about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not someone else trying to guarantee your happiness. So,
why do you think so few politicians talk about these values, beliefs, principles that attracted you, attracted me, and attract so many people, and may cause a light bulb to go off and say, hey, wait a minute, I agree with that guy rather than that guy?
Because you just said the operative word, you said politician. And politicians are going to say what they think people want to hear. We need to have more statesmen, because a statesman is a person that's going to tell you what you need to hear. And there are a lot of people in Washington, D.C., they're not comfortable with that. They're not comfortable with telling the American people that if we don't do something about the mandatory spending side of our budget, it doesn't matter how much taxes you raise. This is going to overtake our budget, and we're going to be in perpetual debt and deficit. Now, that's not the popular thing to say, you know, that Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security needs to be reformed, needs to be improved, but it's the right thing to say, because a politician is a person that is not able to look at himself in the mirror at the end of the day.
Does the Republican Party need to change? Can it change? Will it change?
I think the Republican Party has to change. The Republican Party should not be the party that is passing $1.3 trillion omnibus spending bills. The Republican Party should not be the party that is not reducing the size and scope of the federal government. The Republican Party should not be the party that, you know, when we look at our personal income tax rates, I mean, the president said initially he wanted to go down to 3. The House of Representatives said 4, the Senate, 7. So we really didn't see any massive movement or massive changes.
On the individual side.
On the individual side. Now, the corporate side, yes. I mean, you've seen an incredible change there, going from 35 to 21%. And we see what has happened with our economic growth, our GDP numbers, and what have you. But the important thing is that the Republican Party should be standing up for individual economic empowerment, because we know what the progressive socialist left believes in. They believe in economic enslavement and the dependency society.
Is the problem the Republican leadership, or the problem that the Republican Party, they've had, by my calculation, really 2 solid conservatives in the last century, Coolidge and Reagan?
Yes.
And we'll see what history writes about Trump. I think he's doing a pretty darn good job.
Absolutely.
But they seem to still lurch in the progressive direction, because, the progressive movement really started it was really pushed within the Republican Party at the beginning of the last century. Theodore
Roosevelt.
Yeah. And they seem to lapse into that constantly, don't they?
Yes, they do. And I think the important thing for us to see today in the American political atmosphere is that this is all about the relationship between the individual and government and the system of governance. I think you have 3 different philosophies that are out there. You have progressive socialism, which is what we see, the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, what have you. But then you can also be a progressive and want to see a bigger impact and reach of government than you want to see with constitutional conservatism, which is what our founding fathers intended us to be, and understand that the most important thing in the United States of America is individual sovereignty. And there are some people in Washington, D.C. that just don't want to cede that back over to the American people because it scares them. That is what the whole Tea Party movement was about. It was not a party movement. It was a philosophical movement that talked about the relationship of the individual to the government. And it was really about fiscal issues. And that's kind of like how this country got started. You know, the tyranny of taxation and some of the other things we saw from the British. So I think that the Republican Party has kind of tried to, you know, walk an incredible balancing act, but they tend to teeter more so to Washington, D.C. and the power that's inside this beltway.
So you run for Congress the first time and you lose.
Yep.
In a very tough district.
Yep.
You won the second time and you win.
Mm-hmm.
You're a Tea Party favorite. Your principles, as you espouse them right now, you espoused them back then. Same beliefs, same values. Mm-hmm. You run for re-election, and you lose by 2,100 votes or something in what was, in my view, a very suspicious election. You think you might run again?
You know, if I were to tell you that every day I'm not approached about that, and there's something within you, you will always answer the call of service. You know, I moved to Texas 4 years ago, and after this election cycle, you know, Angela and I and the daughters, Aubrey and Austin, we're going to
beautiful wife, Angela.
Yeah, we're going to, who is much smarter than I am, PhD and everything. We're going to sit down, we're going to evaluate this because I think it's important that we have statesmen. I think it's important that we have folks that understand servant leadership and citizen legislators. That's what we have to restore. And we have to have people with their courage of their convictions.
I happen to know you're a voracious reader. I mean, you and I, when I came to see in Florida a few years back, we're talking about Aristotle and Cicero, and I go, whoa, 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 you read all it? And you said, yeah. You read all my books, not that that's the test. You read a lot. When did that start? Did that start when you were in the military, before you were in the military, recently?
No, that's one of the things the military definitely inculcated into me. You know, we used to have a reading list as you know, new second lieutenants. And one of the books on that reading list was Erwin Rommel's book, Attacks. And that was about the exploits of him as an infantry lieutenant and infantry captain in Romania. And the important thing is that, you know, that was the book that Patton read about Rommel and that enabled him to defeat Rommel. And then,
I read your book.
I read your book. Yeah, but that was important because after that incredible defeat at Kasserine Pass. So I think that if you're going to, you know, try to present yourself as a leader, one of the important C's of leadership is competence. And you should not be able to stand up there and not back up what you're professing to believe in without being able to say, here is where it relates throughout history. And that, I think, is what the military does train you to do. Because when you're in a battle or whatever, you don't have time to pull out the manual and whatever, but it has to be ingrained within you because folks are looking for that cool, steady hand when bullets are flying.
When we return, I want to ask you about foreign policy. I want to ask you about this recent spat, this election of a Democratic Socialist and this push in the Democrat Party and so forth, and get your take on that. Ladies and gentlemen, check out Levin TV almost every weeknight by joining crtv.com. How do you do it? You give us a call at 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. We'd love to have you over there. We'll be right back. Colonel West.
Yes, sir.
President Trump.
Yes, sir.
Doing a good job?
I think he's doing a fantastic job. And I know him personally because 3 of his properties were there in the congressional district that I was honored to represent. You know, I've done events with him at Mar-a-Lago, visited with him up in Trump Tower. I think the important thing is to kind of bifurcate President Trump, and there are things about, you know, his personality that, you know, maybe I wouldn't do, especially on the Twitter or what have you. I don't think you can really do policy in 240 characters. But when you look at his policies, when you look at what has happened with our economy, with people getting back to work, these all-time incredible unemployment numbers, workforce participation rate, GDP growth, You can't debate those things. Those are facts. If you want to compare it to what President Obama did, I mean, he's blowing it out of the water. When you look at what has happened with our foreign policy, I mean, we are now regarded, we are now respected. We're not having off-mic flexibility moments. We don't have strategic patience. We're not leading from behind. We're not drawing false red lines. And when you look at our national security and the rebuilding of our military capability capacity, when was the last time you heard a headline about ISIS? When was the last time you had a domestic terrorist attack here in the United States of America? I mean, knock on wood. But remember, December of 2009, you know, we had Fort Hood. And that was Fort Hood that Barack Obama said was workplace violence. I don't think we have a president that has an issue about saying who the enemy really is. We're not going to be sending Iran pallets of cash, and that really has the mullahs over there upset. And I really think that he is putting the right type of pressure on Russia and China. So, you know, there is nothing.
So you're very pleased.
I'm
Okay,
ecstatic.
let me ask you this. The Democrats, who not only put up with 8 years of Obama, but defended him every step of the way. The Iran deal, which was an outrageous deal. He basically turned the other cheek when it came to Russia, Crimea, so forth, and the invasion of Ukraine. He did nothing about the Chinese ripping us off on our technology.
Nothing.
He tells Trump on the way out, watch North Korea, their problem. I look all around the world, and this president has inherited all these issues.
Yes.
Did you think that we'd have a president finally who would say, you know what, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and we're moving our embassy there? All of them campaigned on it. He did it.
Yes.
And same with the Iran deal. He tried it. He said, no, we're going to have to kill that. He has shown to me, you tell me, you brought up statesmanship. Statesmanship isn't just speeches, as you said.
Yeah.
It's action.
It's actions.
What do you say?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, Barack Obama was this, you know, perfect image, great speech giver on a teleprompter. But there was no there. It was just a facade. It was like a Hollywood set. You know, you just have the face and there's nothing behind it. But we have substance right now. And you have a president that is he's really putting people on notice. You look at what is happening with the Ukraine. Barack Obama sent them MREs and socks. Donald Trump is sending them weapons. The people in the Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, they were concerned about being overrun by Vladimir Putin and Russia. Now we have joint and combined military operations going on there. When was the last time you heard about a Russian overflight of a naval vessel? When was the last time you heard about the Iranians putting, you know, our sailors on their knees at gunpoint? It's not going to happen anymore. Now, what is really going on in the United States of America and what is driving the progressive socialist left into this apoplectic meltdown is because they are being exposed. They are being exposed for who they are, their weakness, what their dislike of the United States of America. Oh, come on. I mean, Mark, every day you turn on, the media is just, you know, their hair is on fire. But their hair is on fire, and their folks, I could care less about Stormy Daniels. You know, the most important thing is people that are out there able to work, take care of their families, send their kids to college, take a summer vacation. That was not possible during the years of Barack Obama. You know, 1 to maybe not even 2% GDP growth, that was supposed to be the new normal. The president has already blown through that in 18 months.
Why do the media hate him so much?
They hate him because he won. They hate him because the grand strategy of the left was they had the first black president, then they were going to have the first female president, then they were probably going to have the first Hispanic president, then they were probably going to have another identity politics president. So they were looking at 32 years of ideological domination of the United States of America, which includes the Supreme Court. So they're going to be ruling, not governing this great constitutional republic. Donald Trump came in from outside, and it's not just the liberal progressive media. I mean, you have people like George Will, Max Boot, Bill Kristol, all of these folks that were so comfortable with inside the Beltway in their own little rice bowl. It got upset by a person that came in from the outside. He did not act as they scripted things to be, and now he's producing results, and they're not relevant anymore. So Donald Trump has completely exposed the left to the point that now there's no doubt that they're socialists. They're telling us that they're socialists.
And what do you make of that? What do you make of the fact that Bernie Sanders, 76 years old, he's an old-time, we used to call, well, red, socialist, from Vermont, really quite an eccentric figure, gets 45% of the Democrat Party vote in the primary. You have a 28-year-old who has difficulty really explaining her policies, but they've got the usual talking points. She's pushed out there by the media as the new movement within the Democrat Party. You now have people who want to run for the Democrat nomination trying to out-left-wing each other.
Absolutely.
Is that a prescription for disaster for the country or disaster for the Democrat Party?
It's a prescription for a disaster for the Democrat Party, and that's why you see that hashtag walk away that is out there, because America is not about wealth redistribution. America is not about nationalizing economic production. America is not about expanding the welfare state, which is what Obama did, with more people being in poverty, more people being on food stamps. America is not about social egalitarianism. And really what you see the Democrat Party standing up for is what I call the culture of the participation trophy. You know, everybody's going to get something for doing nothing. But someone has to pay into this for them to be able to have the free health care, have the free college education. Remember the 2008 meltdown that we saw happen? You trace that back 30 years prior to 1978 with Jimmy Carter and the Community Reinvestment Act, when he had this misconceived notion of benevolence, which is from Frederick Bastiat, the law, that everyone has a right to own a home. Now, how did that work out? And you look at those 30 years, all the different things that happened along the way, the mortgage-backed securities, how they were being sold around, the rise of Fannie and Freddie, the repeal of the Glass-Steagall.
The banks.
Crash the banks. That's what happens when you have these idiots. And I have to be very honest, they're idiots, because history shows this never works. But they stand up and they say that incredible four-letter word, free. And that's why it's so important that we get into our system of education and restore it to be a system of education and not a system of indoctrination, because that's where the left is churning out the next generation of Ocasio-Cortezes out there who has an economics degree from Boston University. Someone needs to get their money back.
We'll be right back.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Lauren Green. Wildfires in California claiming the life of another firefighter today. The firefighter was struck by a falling tree while clearing brush around the massive fire near Yosemite National Park. He died before making it to the hospital. Meanwhile, the car fire near Redding, California, killing a sixth person. This blaze has consumed more than 500 buildings, but officials say they're feeling optimistic and starting to gain ground on the fire. Congressman John Lewis released from the hospital today with a clean bill of health. The Georgia Democrat was hospitalized yesterday for undisclosed reasons, staying overnight for observation. The civil rights icon, who marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma, Alabama in 1965, has represented Georgia since 1987. I'm Lauren Green. Now back to Life, Liberty, and Levin.
Alan West, China. If we're not careful, in 50 years, 100 years, China will be the most powerful superpower on the face of the earth, won't it?
It absolutely will. And what China did was they sat back and they watched the collapse of the Soviet Union, and they learned a very important lesson. The collapse of the Soviet Union did not come militarily. Our military capability, capacity, and our deterrence was able to bring about that collapse. But the Soviet Union really collapsed economically. And so what the Chinese understood is that we still want to be communists, but there's something about this capitalism thing, there's something about this free market thing that we can use, and we can become like a tick. We can insert ourselves into the West, and we can suck the blood out of them and get fat to the point where they can't take us out. And if they try to take us out, they're going to get Lyme disease and they're going to die. And that's exactly where we are. When China got in with most favored nation status and entered into the trade environment of the West, they understood that they could then leverage who they are and, you know, supply us with the cheap goods, and we would become wedded to that. I remember one of the critical things that we fought against down in South Florida was the Chinese drywall. And so what we have seen is that we stopped our production. We stopped our manufacturing. We were so happy to try to have these relations and everything with China, but they could not be trusted. And you know about the theft of our intellectual property. You know about the forced technology transfers to the point now, look at what they're doing in the South China Sea. The South China Sea, where they have built these man-made islands and fortified them with military weaponry, that's 40 to 45% of sea lane of commerce that transits through there. And ask yourself, from a historical perspective, when was the last time we saw an Asian nation occupy islands in the Pacific or in that area and put military weaponry on there to include airfields? And that's what we have to learn. And so these guys are sitting back saying, we can beat the Americans because they're not in it for the long haul.
Can they?
No, because I think that President Trump has exposed them. But the thing that they are hoping for is that there'll be a change in leadership, because it's something about America. You know, we keep doing this drastic swing of the pendulum. We have to have a continuum. You know, you talked about Ronald Reagan early on, and you talked about Calvin Coolidge. If you don't have people that follow up behind those presidential administrations that continue those principles and those perspectives and those policies, then you do swing the opposite direction. And at some point in time, the American ship of state has to have that steady state.
Here's what I've not understood. Follow up on your point here. China, Russia too. Mm-hmm. This argument, this paradigm that the Russians wanted Trump to win, when the Russians were getting everything they could from Hillary Clinton. Why would the Russians want Donald Trump to win? Look at what he's doing now.
It makes no sense whatsoever, because, you know, under Obama, they got rid of the missile defense program with Poland. With Obama, Kerry believed the Russians with the chemical weapons being removed from Syria. Absolutely not. They did not want to have someone that would be tougher on them. Now, they really didn't know about President Trump because he's never been in politics or what have you.
They knew about Hillary.
They knew about Hillary. And so without a doubt, you want to continue on with the reset button, that cute little plastic toy. But when you look at what President Trump has done, all of these people that were on the yellow brick road heading out to Oz, you know, North Korea, Iran, Russia, China, the Islamic jihadists, now all of a sudden, they're like, who is this guy? Where did he come from? Much the same as with Ronald Reagan when he came in, and he had a theory of peace through strength, because weakness is very enticing to despots and dictators.
And what do you make of this relentless and ongoing commentary on the left against the president? His meeting with Putin, he shouldn't have met with Putin. The press conference was a disaster, and they must have something on him.
Well, they have to come up with the conspiracy theories and distractions, because, you know, in truth, if you saw Secretary Pompeo's testimony this past week before the Senate, right? It was absolutely incredible. I mean, he embarrassed some of those senators, which really shows they don't have the competence, they don't know the gravity of some of these situations that are going on. But with far and above, our position is a position of strength. And I think that what you're going to start seeing now with the Trump administration maybe is a shift from the old Europe, Western Europe, and more so focused toward Eastern Europe. I call that the new Europe, you know, the Poland, the Ukraine, the Baltic states, some of these other former Soviet satellite states that understand that we want better relations with the United States. We want better trade relations. We'll take the oil and natural gas. Don't mind what Angela Merkel in Germany is doing. So I think that's the next big foreign policy shift, and that will help to undermine Russia's economy even more.
Folks, don't forget, most weeknights you can watch me on Levin TV. You join us at crtv.com, crtv.com. We'd love to have you. Or call 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. We'll be right back. You know, you've fought for this country, you've served this country, and then you look at what took place in the last election with the last administration interfering in this election. The top echelon of the FBI has been wiped out now. Liars. Some are under investigation. Some, we're not sure. People are still investigating. You look at some of the highest levels of the intelligence agencies. John Brennan, who's out there making statements I've never seen a former CIA director make. Clapper. As a matter of fact, they're paid contributors to very liberal, news outlets. Yeah. You look at this, you're a man of history, you're a man in the military, you served in Congress. You ever seen anything like this?
No, and it's appalling. The only place you will find it is, some banana republic or some other third world type of country. You would have never thought that our democracy and our democratic fundamentals would be threatened like this here in the United States of America. And let me put something else to rest. I had a TS-SCI clearance when I was in the United States military. That's the top.
It's the highest?
It's the highest. It's the sensitive compartmented information. When I retired, my clearance was gone. So I don't understand how people that no longer have a need to know are supposedly still hanging on to clearances. Just because you're a commentator with some other news, outlet, that doesn't guarantee you to have a clearance. A clearance for the United States of America is a privilege. It's not a right. And I think that is the number one thing that is happening in our government, that too many people believe that they have a right to do things when serving this country is a privilege, and it should be an honor. When I think about so many of the things that happened during the Obama administration, I've been in combat. I've been in a firefight, and the longest firefight I was in was maybe about 3 to 5 minutes, but it seemed forever. Imagine those individuals that were abandoned by the Obama administration for 13 hours.
Benghazi.
In Benghazi. And think about the fact that you had the National Security Advisor stand on the stage. Well, no, she wasn't the National Security Advisor at the time. She was the ambassador to the UN. Susan Rice, stand on the stage, on a platform, and lie about it 5 times. See, this is what is happening in the United States of America. People are losing confidence in the federal government. When you are just a ma and pa constitutional conservative grassroots organization, and the power of a federal government agency is unleashed on you, see, we have a cancer that is growing in Washington, D.C., and I don't think that the people that are there in the House and the Senate, I don't think they understand. I don't think the people in the federal government, they don't get it. They don't realize that when they hear people talk about disarming law-abiding legal gun owners in America, but yet they want to abolish ICE, they want to allow criminal illegal immigrants, MS-13 gang members to run free in the sanctuaries that they set up. This is a cancer that has to be stomped out in the United States of America.
Do you think we've gone too far in terms of the FISA court? The secrecy of the court, I understand, but there's really no balance in there. Do you think we've gone too far in the power in some of the intelligence agencies, and we need more checks and balances when it comes to senior levels of the FBI? Nobody's really talking about it.
Yeah, you need to have that. As a matter of fact, when I was in Congress and the renewal of the Patriot Act for 5 years came up, I didn't vote for it because that is just too much power that you have in one person's hand. Now, President Bush may have had all the great intentions, but when it got into the hands of someone else, it was bad intentions. I don't want to see an East German type of Stasi situation where we have secret courts and secret judges, people that can go out and get warrantless surveillance against American citizens. That's not who we are as the American people. And I know that a lot of times folks say that we have to do this in order to fight terrorism, whatever. Just fight terrorism. Just understand who the enemy is, but don't start punishing Americans and don't create these levels of secrecy. There is an incredible chasm right now between Washington, D.C. and the American people. There's an incredible amount of distrust. And I just don't think the people that are over there, working Monday through Thursday or Tuesday through Friday, that they get it.
And yet there's no talk about addressing these institutions. We have one party that is a special pleader for everything that's taken place, and they disrupt congressional hearings, and they endorse any efforts that are against the President of the United States. They accept no responsibility for the Espionage Act and Hillary Clinton's actions. And to me, it was crystallized in James Comey. They wanted Comey out. They despised Comey. They accused him of costing them the election. And the minute Donald Trump fired him, they flipped.
Of course.
That he was firing this angelic man who served the country so beautifully and used it against him.
Never let a good crisis go to waste. Rahm Emanuel's thing. And look, when you talk about what Hillary Clinton did, if I had done 1/10 of what Hillary Clinton did while I was an officer serving in the United States military, I would not be sitting here with you right now.
Drummed out.
Well, no, I would be in a brown jumpsuit in Fort Leavenworth. Now, why is it that there are different levels of justice, different levels of law, different rules for the people over there in Washington, D.C.?
Well, let's pursue that as soon as we come back.
Yep.
And we'll be right back. unequal justice based on party, based on ideology?
I think it is based upon who are the elites and who are the rest of the schmucks. Because I think that there's an academic elitism, there's political, media, cultural, entertainment, and that transcends the R&D thing. And I see a kind of a Soviet-style Politburo that is being formed in the United States of America, and that's repulsive to me, because the greatness of America is that justice should be blind, and justice should be equally applied to everyone, no matter what your position
What
may
is
be.
the Soviet Politburo type?
The Soviet Politburo were, there's this imaginary cut line. And everyone above the cut line, you know, there's a different, you know, expectation. There's
They're
a different,
protected?
They're protected. Then everyone, like I said, everyone below, that's we used to call them Joe Schmuckatelli, you know, in the Army. And that's everyone that's below. And life is bad for Schmuckatelli. But if you're above this imaginary cut line, it doesn't matter what you do. It does not matter that, you know, you had an email server, a private email server, and you did classified information. Something that anyone in the United States military, anyone that has a security clearance, they're done. They're gone. They're going to prison for that. But yet somehow people can sit around and say, well, it wasn't that she was, you know, criminally negligent. She was just a little careless. And then we come to find out that the same person that was in charge of one investigation is also in charge of another investigation, who is also the person with all these biased emails out there, and we're being told there's no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. And that is what is really upsetting me about what we see happening. But I think that the election of Donald Trump was really a really big middle finger to the elites in this country. And if they're not careful, there are going to be several more fingers that they're going to be given in the midterm elections and then also in the 2020 election.
Do you think there's still enough Americans who think this way?
Absolutely there are. You know, folks try to discount the quote-unquote flyover country, but those folks stood up. Think about what happened in Pennsylvania. For so long, you know, Pennsylvania as statewide politics was based upon whatever happened in Pittsburgh, whatever happened in Philadelphia. Now, all of a sudden, everything that's in between, which is kind of like SEC football country, they stood up and said, no, we don't want to be dictated by the people in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. This is who we...
It was really incredible, wasn't it, to watch the media?
Absolutely.
When Florida came in, when Pennsylvania came in, Ohio comes in, North Carolina comes in.
Wisconsin.
And you see Wisconsin, you go, holy mackerel. And they were so dejected. And I think they decided there and then, this cannot stand.
This cannot stand, and this is how we're going to leverage, we're going to weaponize the federal government and the quote-unquote deep state, which does exist, these bureaucrat administrative state, against the will of the American people.
And Reagan used to call it the Iron Triangle. You know, the media, the bureaucracy, and whatever the other one was, I don't know, maybe the Democrat Party. When we come back, I want to ask you, what concerns you the most about the future of the country? Because I know you think about these things all the time, and you talk about them too. Have we reached a point where the Democrat Party and the government are almost one and the same? Maybe it's the media, the Democrat Party, and the government. And how do we deal with that when we return? Colonel West, what is your biggest concern going forward in this country?
There are two things that really do concern me. First of all, we have to restore a system of education and eradicate the system of indoctrination that we have in our schools that's starting to go down now, even to the elementary school level. I often tell people the most important elected position in the United States of America is school board. And we need to have people that go out there and run for school board.
It's a hard job, man. I was a school board member.
There you go. You heard it, everybody. There you go. That's your example. The other thing is this. What I see is the grand strategy of the left. They're going into red states and they're taking over the major population centers, the major urban centers. In Texas, you look at all the major cities, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, Houston, El Paso, all controlled by the left. That is their playbook. You look at Tennessee, you look at Georgia, and we've got to turn that back around because that's where you see the biggest failure of the left's policies in the inner cities.
Do you think they're doing it in part due to immigration? You and I know full well if those were future Republicans coming across the border,
No, they say forget it.
the Democrats are fighting this tooth and nail. Do you think this is sort of a big picture thing that they're involved in?
Absolutely. And that's why you hear, abolish ICE, get rid of the borders. They want to, get more people dependent upon them. That's their electoral base. They don't want to see folks able to go out and work because you don't need them giving you stuff.
Next election, midterm election, Republicans or Democrats?
It's going to be the Republicans because the Democrats are not offering anything to the American people.
Will it be close?
I think that if you go on a scale of 0 to 10, Republicans will pull an 8.
Do you think they'll hold most of their seats? Do you think they'll have a small minority?
I think their majority in the House will shrink, but I think that you're going to see an expansion of the Republican majority in the Senate.
You're going to see much change in the Republican leadership? I personally don't think so.
It depends on who the new Speaker of the House will be.
Mm-hmm. Who might that be?
I think that it'll end up being Kevin McCarthy, although Steve Scalise would be a good choice, or Jim Jordan.
It's been a great pleasure.
It's been all mine. Be well, my friend.
God bless.
God be with you.
See you next time on Life, Liberty, and Levin.